My first impressions of Metroid Prime 4 haven't been amazing. I'm just going to be honest. They haven't been what I expected going into this, but let's just talk through it, okay? Let's just talk through how I'm feeling, how I'm liking Metroid Prime 4 so far, and maybe why I'm feeling a certain specific way. So first of all, Metroid Prime 4 just released, as I'm sure you can tell by now. Going into this, I was a little skeptical about how I was going to enjoy this game because I've played Metroid Prime Remastered back when that released in 2022, I think is when it was, or early 2023. But I played that back when that released, and I liked it for the most part, but it wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't like a fantastic experience. Like, I enjoyed it. I think I played about 75% of it, but I never really got super in depth and super deep into it, or I didn't like it enough to actually finish it, clearly. But that being said, I like some Metroidvanias. I like other Metroid games, like Metroid Dread. I think that's probably the best Metroid game I've ever played. Yes, it's a 2D Metroid game, but the fundamentals are very similar. It's just 2D instead of Metroid Prime's 3D. Some of the things I didn't really love about Metroid Prime when I did initially play it was the fact that there was lots of backtracking and I didn't really know where to go a lot of the time. So that's just something that I don't know if it's just a me problem, but whenever I play a Metroid game or a Metroidvania or whatever that requires backtracking, I always get lost, or I always don't know what to do. Maybe I overthink it, or maybe I don't think about it enough, but that's just something I always run into when I play these Metroid games. I always have like a tutorial or a guide out just to help me, just in case I get lost. I probably don't use it that often, but it's out just for when I inevitably need to use it. That's just something I've noticed when I play Metroidvanias, specifically Metroid games themselves. And Metroid Dread and Metroid Prime Remastered did help a little bit, but regardless, I had to have a guide out. I had to do it. There was just some things that weren't explained to me all that well, or again, maybe I wasn't comprehending it fully when the game taught me these mechanics. That being said, I wasn't a huge fan of these of Metroid Prime when that first released. I didn't finish it. I liked the game for what it was, but I wouldn't consider myself a diehard Metroid Prime fan. Now, that being said, going into Metroid Prime 4, I had some pretty high expectations. Like, obviously, at the end of the day, it is a Metroid Prime game, and it's silly for me to think that they would not stay within their roots or whatever, and they did change a lot of fundamental things about Metroid Prime 4 so far, but I played it, and I gotta say, this is a Metroid Prime game. I really don't know what else to say. It's a Metroid Prime game. Actually, I got lots to say. This has got a lot of upgrades and a lot of interesting quirks still that we should probably discuss. And let me just say, speaking of Metroid games, I love the fundamentals. I love the fundamentals of Metroid games. You got the finding upgrades, unlocking new areas and all that stuff. I found it was, very enjoyable just going through and upgrading your character, or upgrading Samus. So let's talk about Metroid Prime 4 itself. I find myself stumbling into the same issues that I didn't like about the first Metroid Prime game. And let me just say, I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm going to only show the first little arena or the first level of my gameplay. I don't want to go too far. I'm going to show as far as when you unlock Viola in the open world desert, which we all know about. So you don't need to worry about spoilers. But anyways, this is very similar in the past Prime games, because a lot of it has to do with exploring and navigating around these forbidden areas all by yourself. You're pretty much just discovering it. You're just going around and looking at things. There's lots of checking the map and hoping your route is correct. And that in and of itself isn't bad, but I gotta say, I've already stumbled into a couple times where I'm just completely lost, or maybe I just don't know where to go yet. Not as much as I did for Metroid Prime Remastered. Like, this one does seem a little bit more linear, not as backtracky. There was times where I'm like, okay, now what do I do? And the game does have a little way of helping you or nudging you in the right direction, which I'll get back to, but that's just something I noticed. Okay, I mean, there's just a lot of discovery that goes on here, and I really get why people like it, and I like it to a certain extent, but I personally prefer a lot more clearer waypoints instead of, trial and error wandering around. It just feels like sometimes I'm actually wasting a lot of my gameplay time trying to figure out where to go, when the game would just be more fun to me if it just told me where to go. Now, maybe that's lame, maybe that's baby mode. That's just something I prefer. Another very Metroid-y thing that this game does, of course, because it's Metroid, is the save system. I knew this going into it, And I've played, again, a lot of Metroid games. I know how the save system works. If you're not aware, if you save, then when you die, you go back to the save point. So if I save and then 15 minutes later I go and die at a boss, I'm all the way back at that last save point. I get why it does this. This is like a whole thing. You have to actually use the save as your strategy, which I totally get. And I like to a certain extent, but I forgot about it when I first played the game, and I don't think it actually ever explains it that well, or to any new players, which is I think who Nintendo is trying to target with this Metroid Prime game specifically. But I had played it for like 30-35 minutes, going through, progressing, doing all that stuff, and then I died. And then and it didn't even give me any option to save. Anytime I see a save slot, I'll go and I'll save it myself. But there was like a 30 some odd minute progression that I just lost because I forgot that I couldn't die before it goes back. Again, this is classic Metroid. I can appreciate it now that I know that it exists, but that first time really caught me off guard. And again, this is my first impressions of the game. This isn't an overall review. This is just my first impressions as a more casual gamer, I would say. A casual gamer who does this for a living. Anyways, that is the most Metroidness of the game, the exploration and that save system thing. That's about as mainstream Metroid as it gets, and those are just the fundamentals and mechanics I don't personally vibe with the most, but I can get around. Now let's talk about more about the game itself and more how I'm feeling about it aside from the Metroidness of it. Like, what does this game bring that is really interesting and unique to this game specifically that I like or don't like? First of all, the controls and comfort of the game. So, big part of the marketing for this game, at least when the Switch 2 was first announced before this game was released or whatever, they really showed off, and it's even on the box art, that this game can use mouse mode. And I think it's fair to say that it's good to see mouse mode being used in a first-party game that actually makes good use of mouse mode. Like, of course, this is a first-person shooter. Of course, we gotta have mouse mode. Like, finally, they added a game with mouse mode that actually makes a lot of sense. We've seen mouse mode used in games like Fortnite before, but it's still a little bit janky in Fortnite. And when I did play this game early at one of the Nintendo Switch 2 events or whatever, I used mouse mode and I actually really liked it. So when I got home today and I played it, I booted it up. That's the first mode I wanted to use. I used mouse mode. Of course I did. And honestly, it just felt a little bit uncomfortable, a little more uncomfortable than I was expecting to. I think it's because I really like playing on the couch. Of course, I like to play on the couch. I'm like playing like a regular gamer. I got a TV sitting on my couch. I don't have a desk in front of me, as I think most people who play this game will have as well. So I'm sitting on the couch, and I always find that using it on your lap or on the couch beside you, it just never works properly. Like, I got a hairy leg, so maybe the extra hairness of it doesn't help me actually control, the Joy-Con that much, or maybe that's what kind of throws it off a little bit. And I also think the cloth texture on my couch just doesn't work it very well. I use a mouse pad sometimes when I do want it to work perfectly on the couch, but even then, I used it for like 15 minutes. I was using it just normally, using mouse mode, and it just wasn't comfortable. It just didn't feel very intuitive, and I think that's mainly because the controls overall are a lot more complicated and complex, especially as you unlock more abilities. There were times, even after 3 or 4 hours of me playing this game, where the controls just didn't fully click yet. In fact, still when I need to like scan things, I'm like, okay, wait, which button do I need to press here? Oh, right, okay, you gotta press X, and then you gotta press ZL. Okay, that's fine. And then you gotta go back to the battle mode or whatever. Then you gotta go into your ball, and then you gotta use a bomb with the ball. There's just so many controls that it's just complicated to get used to, and especially when you're using these controls that are somewhat complicated in mouse mode, it just kind of, I don't know, it's just a lot. It's just a lot for me, which again could be just me. I don't know, but I think for a majority of people, it's going to take quite a bit to get used to when you're using mouse mode, especially with all these more complex buttons. And you know what? To be fair to this game, a lot of other Metroid games have pretty complex controls as well. I think having the complex controls here, as well as having a new way to play with the mouse mode, it just makes it a little bit more complicated. But okay, I think you get it at this point. All that being said, I eventually just switched to using a Pro controller. I found that was a lot easier for me to wrap my head around. I also like how the Pro controller feel in my hand a lot better than the Joy-Con. Even if it's split Joy-Con or mouse mode Joy-Con, the Pro controller just fits better. And you can also use gyro still. So this is kind of disappointing. I really thought that this was going to be the game that was going to make me utilize the mouse mode more than any other game that is on the Nintendo Switch 2, aside from, Drag X Drive or something. I really did think that this was going to be like, oh yeah, I love the mouse mode in this one. I can't play this without mouse mode. And maybe I'll give it another shot if I have more of a desk setup. Maybe I'll bring it to my desk and I'll use it that way and I'll be blown away. And I think that could be the case, because when I did play it at these Switch 2 events when I got to play the game early, that's how they had it. They had a full desk setup with a mouse pad. It was honestly the perfect setup, but the reality is when you play this game on a couch, it's just not going to be the perfect setup. And I have to come to terms with that. If I want to play on my couch, I shouldn't be using mouse mode. I'll just use the Pro Controller instead. Now let's talk about a little bit more of a drama about this game that I've seen all over the internet, which I haven't even talked about once, but I've seen so many people talk about it. And that is, of course, the NPC characters. So NPC characters were a big problem with a lot of people who got to go and play this game early. A lot of people didn't like them because they didn't really add much to the game. They just added a lot of unnecessary talking and maybe a bit of too much guidance than maybe you would want in a Metroidvania where you are discovering everything yourself. Now, as you can probably tell based on what I said before and how I don't always love the discovery factor and how I would prefer to just be told kind of where to go so I can play the game as linear as possible, I don't actually mind these NPCs that much. I don't mind them that much at all, actually. Now, I will say it is a little bit awkward and very different compared to previous Metroid games, and I think it can be forced in some ways. Like when you first meet this main guy, Miles Morales here, he's like stuck on this ship, but I don't really know why he's stuck on this ship, and he's just kind of talking to himself. So it seems a little kiddie. I've seen a lot of people kind of relate this to Avengers movies and stuff like that, and I don't even know what it is or how I'm picturing that, but yeah, this kind of feels like an Avengers movie or some sort of Marvel cinematic universe. It's just this guy's talking over and over and over again, kind of like me right now about this. And listen, like I said, I don't really mind him that much. I think he talks quite a bit more, and that these NPC characters might be a little bit forced, but it works fine. I do like that it adds a little bit more character and a little bit more of a story to this, instead of Samus just randomly being in this desolate random universe. At least she has some other people to talk through it with and add a little bit more story to this entire game. Now, my biggest nitpick about the NPCs and Samus and everything is the fact that Samus doesn't respond at all, and I think that's what makes it the worst. I think that's why the NPCs do feel so awkward. Samus doesn't have any major voice acting from what I've seen so far and what I've played in the first several hours, like the first 5 or 6 hours. I don't even know if I said that that's how long I played it so far. My first impressions on Samus with these NPCs is that it's just awkward when Samus isn't talking. They totally should have added a voice actor for Samus. Now, I know Nintendo doesn't like adding voice actors to the playable characters because they want you to think about the playable characters kind of like yourself or kind of portray your own personality for them. But I really think that adding a personality here would have done the interactions with the NPCs a lot more justice. I just think it would have made it less awkward and a lot more engaging story-wise. A game that does this very well is Horizon Zero Dawn or Forbidden West. Those games portray a lead female character having voice actors very well, and I think the voice lines from that character actually adds a lot to the personality, which I think could have happened here with Samus, but they just didn't, because this is Nintendo and they want a very sanitized, free-thinking person that you play as. I don't really know. It's just noticeable, and I think that's why it doesn't land very well with a lot of people. All right, next we gotta talk about visuals and the performance. So, I've been playing this on the Switch 2, and I gotta say the lighting looks fantastic, as well as just the overall resolution and frame rate. It is, of course, a sharp 4K resolution, and that is beautiful in these environments, especially with the effects and, like I said, the lighting. The textures are really, really sharp, and it runs at a smooth 60 frames per second. And on top of that, we can get it to at 1080p if you want, and at 120 frames per second if you play it in 1080p. 120 frames per second is amazing, and I think this is like one of the first-party games from Nintendo that actually runs at 120 hertz aside from Welcome Tour. But it's just amazing that they added that 120 hertz. It's really cool, and I think with the 120 hertz and playing in the mouse mode, that's going to be a lot better if you have a desk setup and everything. me personally, I play it in 4K 60 frames per second. I like playing at a smooth frame rate. Yes, I like 60 frames per second, but I do like that extra sharp detail, and I think that the sharp detail alone is a little bit better than the 120 hertz. I like both. I just really think that 60 frames per second is enough, especially for a first-person shooter. That's good enough, but 4K is just so crisp that I gotta have the 4K on. Also, I record it for my YouTube channel like you're seeing right now, and I can upload 4K 60 frames per second footage, but I can't upload 120 frames per second, so I might as well just record it at 4K 60 as well. Now, the visuals and the performance has been also getting dragged through the mud a little bit, with some specifically pointing out the open world desert area that you play with Viola, which is the bike, by the way. Yeah, this does look a little bit barren, and I think this is mainly because of the Switch 1. I think that's why there's a couple of visual cutbacks in terms of density in the desert. But once you actually get into a level, I think it's pretty condensed. It's a solid level with all the graphics and everything. In fact, I've watched a couple of Switch 1 versus Switch 2 frame rate and graphics comparisons. The Switch 1 version is very solid. The resolution is pretty low on the Switch 1, but the fact that it runs at 60 frames per second and looks as good as it does on the Switch 1 is so impressive. Like, seriously, you should go watch a video comparison after this video is done. And compared to previous Switch 2 editions, compared to the Switch 1 edition, specifically Pokemon, this is just above and beyond. This just looks really good for the Switch 2. It seems like they've added and reworked some textures too that aren't on the Switch 1, but that could just be me. There is a lot to like, and I think a lot of the issues I have with it is just me not fully getting into what this game has to offer yet. I think as I get a little bit further into it, as I progress a little bit further and get some more abilities and all that stuff, it'll really start clicking with me. Like most Metroid games, I think when people play Metroid games, you really just need to give it some time to actually feel like you're a ball in Samus, like you actually know what you're doing. And that's the best part about Metroid games. You go through, you learn the map and the layout a bit better, you do some puzzles and all that stuff, and it just gets going after you actually get into it. But I don't love how it does feel a little bit slow at the beginning. I feel like a lot of games should be really selling you on some of the gameplay mechanics right at the very beginning, and I guess this does do that in some way, but I don't know, I'm just kind of yapping at this point. I also just want to quickly talk about the combat. It's like a very weird combat system, unlike any other first-person shooter or really game. You play mainly with these little shooters. You got beams going out, and you got missiles and stuff like that. It can feel very repetitive in the fights, and a lot of the boss fights are fairly long. And I think after that length of the boss fights, it can start feeling, definitely a little bit repetitive with the fighting, especially if you just have your beam or your rockets. Like at the beginning, it can feel pretty slow and not the most engaging. Also, the music. There's like this weird thing going on with the music, I think. I can't really say what it is, but I cannot stop picturing Sonic Frontiers out of my brain. Like, I feel like this game was trying to have Breath of the Wild music, but for some reason, I just have the Sonic Frontiers music in my brain. There's like a piano going on, and they're adding like the opera music, like classic Metroid games, and a little bit of the synth stuff. But I kind of wish they went in a different direction. The piano is just, oh my goodness, it's Sonic Frontiers every single time I hear about it. And I feel like I've already heard it 1,000 times when I've only started playing this a few hours ago. Or like, I don't know, I've only played it for 5 or 6 hours, and I feel like the songs are already getting old. I don't know if maybe that's because of the trailers or whatever, or because I played it early. I don't even know. It's that's just something I've noticed. Now, everything I have to say today, I don't want you to hear what I say and not purchase the game because, whatever I said. It should be noted that not everybody enjoys this kind of gameplay, and I'm not necessarily a Metroid Prime fan. I didn't love the original. I loved Metroid Dread, but there are just fundamentals of this game and mechanics of this game I don't necessarily vibe with all that much, but I totally get other people getting it, and I totally understand why you may or may not like this. So, that being said, do your research. Don't take my complete word for it. You might be a bit different gamer than me, and I'd love to hear what you think about the game so far and what you think I'm missing or something. Just give me some tips, because obviously I need to know some stuff. But what I do know is that I'm going to keep playing it. I'm going to get through it, and maybe I'll give you my opinion at the end of it in another video. So stay tuned, hit the subscribe button, and of course, if you want to know what I think about Metroid Prime in the future, hit the notification bell. We love that YouTube stuff. Also, you might notice I sound a little different today. I am still sick, which by the way, I think helped a little bit when Metroid Prime came out today. Not that I like being sick or anything. This is dreadful. No pun intended, because of Metroid Dread. But yeah, when I'm sick, I just want to sit on the couch and play a game. And today was one of those days. You just get to sit on the couch, play a game. And it is actually the perfect excuse to. I have so many videos to record. but I don't know. I'm not feeling up to it. So this is great. I get to play Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Anyways, like I said, tell me what you think I should think and what you think about this game. Like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for listening. See you later.